I wasn't invited to Thanksgiving this year, so I decided to host my own, in a $6 million mansion my family doesn't even know exists. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Laura Quinlan, I'm 34, and I've spent most of my life being treated like an outsider by my own family. I grew up in Oregon with my parents, Don and Marla Harrow, and my younger sister, Elise. From the start, they made it clear who the favorite was. Elise was charming, pretty, and loud. I was quiet, stubborn, and according to my mother, too serious for my own good. Even when we were kids, she got the praise and I got the blame. If something went wrong, it was my fault. If something went right, it was because of Elise. I got used to it, until it hurt a little less each year. Then came the biggest betrayal of all. 5 years ago, my boyfriend, Gavin, started getting close to my sister. I thought it was just friendly at first. I was wrong. A few months later, Elise announced her engagement to Gavin at Thanksgiving dinner. My parents smiled, clapped, and acted like nothing was wrong. My mother even told me not to make a scene. That was the last time I ever went to their house. Since then, every Thanksgiving, they post their happy family pictures online. The perfect table, the matching sweaters, the fake smiles. This year, I wasn't just left out. They sent a group email showing the photos to everyone, and somehow I was still on the list. It was like they wanted me to see what I was missing. I stared at those photos for a long time. Elise in her gold dress, Gavin beside her, my parents in the background looking proud. For the first time, instead of crying, I smiled. Because what they didn't know was that I'd been building something far more beautiful than any dinner table they could ever set. 2 years ago, I bought an old cliffside estate on the Oregon coast. It was falling apart when I found it. Windows broken, walls cracked, the ocean wind cutting right through it. I saw what it could be, not what it was. I spent every cent I had and every night after work rebuilding it. Now it's mine. $6 million of peace, freedom, and quiet. This year, when Thanksgiving comes, I won't be alone. I'm sending invitations, not to my family, but to everyone they've ever hurt. People they used, mocked, or left behind. The ones they thought didn't matter. I'll open my doors wide, fill the table with food, and let laughter echo through the halls. And maybe, just maybe, this time Thanksgiving will finally feel like home. When I think about where it all started, it always goes back to our house on the edge of town, the one with peeling paint and the smell of cinnamon rolls that never quite felt warm. My parents, Don and Marla, weren't cruel in obvious ways. They just made it clear who belonged and who didn't. From the moment my sister Elise was born, she became the sun, and I was expected to stay in her shadow. Elise could do no wrong. She'd sing too loudly at dinner, spill juice on the carpet, forget her homework, and my mother would laugh, saying she was spirited. If I ever questioned anything, I was called difficult. My father once told me, "You always have to win, Laura. Not everything is a competition." But to me, it wasn't about winning. It was about being seen. I was smart, curious, the kind of kid who took things apart to understand them. I thought my parents would be proud when I got accepted into an architecture program. Instead, they said I was chasing something impractical. Elise, meanwhile, was busy planning parties, taking pictures, making friends everywhere she went. People adored her, and my parents adored the attention she brought them. When Gavin came into my life, I thought maybe things were turning around. He noticed the small things about me, how I organized my sketches by mood, how I liked silence more than noise. He met my family once, and I saw the way Elise's eyes followed him across the room. She laughed a little too loudly at his jokes, touched his arm when she talked. I told myself it was my imagination. It wasn't. The months that followed felt like standing in a storm pretending the wind wasn't tearing the roof apart. Gavin grew distant, distracted, always busy. I found out the truth when Elise called to tell me she was engaged to him. Her voice was bright, nervous, almost apologetic, but she said it anyway. "It just happened, Laura. You know how love works." That Thanksgiving, I showed up at the family dinner without an invitation. I remember the smell of roasted turkey, the golden candles, and Elise's engagement ring catching the light as she lifted her glass. Gavin couldn't even look at me. My mother leaned in close and whispered, "Don't make a scene." My father nodded, like this was just another thing I had to get over. I left without saying goodbye. The cold air outside felt cleaner than the air in that room. That night, I decided to stop waiting for them to love me. Years passed, and I built my own life piece by piece, drafting designs late into the night, learning how to rebuild what others threw away. Every broken wall I fixed, every room I restored, felt like a quiet promise to myself. I would make something beautiful out of everything they had ruined. The idea came to me one quiet evening as I sat in the empty dining hall of my estate, a single candle flickering against the glass. Thanksgiving was only 2 weeks away, and I could almost hear the laughter from my parents' house echoing across the year. They'd gather as always, smiling, pretending everything was perfect. But this time, I wouldn't be the one left out. This time, I'd host my own dinner. Not for them, but for the ones they had stepped over to stay comfortable. I opened a notebook and began writing names. Not out of anger, but out of memory. The first was Nora Lewis, a nurse my father once screamed at in a hospital corridor when he didn't like the way she spoke to him. I remembered her eyes, calm, tired, humiliated. The second was Tom Weaver, our old neighbor, a kind man who mowed our lawn for free when my parents were away. My mother mocked him for living off scraps, right in front of him. And the third name made me pause. Cal Denson, Gavin's former business partner. Gavin had stolen his design pitch and left him bankrupt. Cal had called me once, years ago, to apologize for something that wasn't his fault. These people carried quiet scars, the kind my family never noticed. They deserved one night where they could sit at a table without fear of being looked down on. The next morning, I began creating the invitations myself. Heavy cream paper, soft texture, my initials pressed in gold at the top corner. Each one handwritten, no stamps, no shortcuts. "You are invited," I wrote, "to an evening of peace, food, and belonging." Every letter felt like I was rebuilding a part of myself. I placed each card in its envelope and sealed it with a simple wax mark, a small leaf, symbolizing growth. When I told Noah Rains, my old college friend and now a private chef, he didn't hesitate. He came to the estate the same afternoon, sleeves rolled up, already planning the menu before I even finished explaining. Noah had always been good at reading silence. He didn't ask why I wanted this. He just said, "Then let's make it unforgettable." We spent the next few days planning: roasted duck instead of turkey, caramelized carrots, chestnut soup, apple tarts with cinnamon glaze. No grand decorations, no gold plates. Just warmth. Every detail mattered. The music, the scent of cedar burning in the fireplace, the way the light would fall on each guest's face. When the last invitation was sent, I sat back and looked at the list once more. Each name carried a story, each person a piece of pain I'd buried long ago. This dinner wasn't just for them. It was for the version of me that once waited for an invitation that never came. This time, I was the one opening the door. The ocean was restless that afternoon, waves breaking against the rocks like they were impatient for the night to begin. My home sat above it all, quiet and steady, tall windows catching the pale November light. The walls were smooth white, the floors warm oak, and gentle echoes filled the open rooms. Nothing loud, nothing to prove. Every corner held a piece I'd shaped: clay bowls, charcoal drawings, curved wood sculptures formed by my hands during sleepless hours. The house didn't shout wealth. It whispered peace. In the dining hall, a single long table stretched across the room like a bridge. I rubbed my fingers along the wood grain, still able to feel the rough bark it once wore before I sanded and polished it myself. Above it hung simple glass chandeliers, clear, elegant, soft light falling like water droplets. No metal finishes, no glitter, only warmth. Linen napkins in muted earth tones lay beside ceramic plates I made in my workshop. The room held the scent of cedar and roasted herbs drifting from the kitchen. I checked each place setting again, not for perfection but for intention. Every seat meant something. Every chair represented a story carried in quietly by someone who once felt small. Tonight they would feel seen. The first knock at the door came just before dusk. The sky had turned lavender, the ocean a deep, humming blue. I walked to the entrance and opened it to find Nora, her coat pulled tight, eyes cautious but hopeful. She gave a nervous smile, unsure if she truly belonged. "You do," I told her, stepping aside. She took a breath and entered, shoulders relaxing just a little. Then came Tom with a homemade loaf wrapped in a towel. His hands shook slightly as he held it out. "I didn't know if I should bring something," he said. "It's perfect," I answered, taking it gently. He looked around the entryway like he'd stepped into another world, though I hoped it felt more like a safe one than an unreachable one. Cal arrived next, quiet as always, offering a small nod. He didn't speak at first, simply handed me a jar of blackberry jam. It was humble, sweet, thoughtful, the kind of gift people bring when they don't want to feel like a burden. "Come in," I said, and he did. As each person walked inside, the house shifted. Footsteps on the wood floors, low voices greeting one another, faint laughter beginning to rise. It didn't feel grand. It felt real. When everyone gathered in the dining room, I stood at the head of the table, hands resting on the back of my chair. The chatter quieted. I looked around at faces filled with uncertainty, hope, a little wonder. "This dinner," I said softly, "is for those who were pushed aside, those who were forgotten or dismissed. Tonight, we share a table where every person matters." And just like that, the tension in my chest eased. For the first time in years, I wasn't bracing for anything. No waiting for pain. No shrinking myself. As candles flickered and gentle voices rose again, a calm settled over me like warm light. I felt whole. At their long dining table, crystal glasses catching warm light, my parents carved turkey with practiced smiles. Laughter circled the room, shallow and bright, the way it always did in that house when pretending came easy. Elise sat closest to my mother, her manicured hand resting lightly on Gavin's arm, as if posing for a picture no one asked them to take. Between bites, she lifted her phone, swiping with boredom, searching for something more interesting than the same polite holiday chatter. Halfway through her scrolling, her face froze. The room kept buzzing around her, but she didn't move. Then, without warning, she sucked in a breath sharp enough to pull every gaze to her. "What is it, sweetheart?" my mother asked, voice dripping soft concern. Elise rotated the screen so my parents could see. There, beneath polished text and a glossy photo, was the estate glimmering against the ocean horizon. A headline sat bold above it: "Architect's Secret Estate Wins Design of the Year." My father leaned in, eyes narrowing as he read. My mother pressed closer, lips parting. Gavin stiffened, jaw tight, trying to mask whatever rolled through him. Elise's voice cut the quiet first. "This is her place." It wasn't a question. It was disbelief soaked in irritation. My mother blinked. "Twice. She kept this from us?" My father set down his fork slowly, as though any sudden motion might shatter the false peace in the room. "She didn't tell us she stayed in the area." His tone wasn't confusion, it was wounded pride. A beat passed. Then another. Jealousy crept into the silence, thick and sour like spoiled wine. The idea that I had built something magnificent without their approval, without their presence, stung them more than my absence ever did. Elise's lips curled into a tight smile, one practiced in mirrors and social events. "We should visit," she announced. It would show her we've forgiven everything, as if forgiveness was theirs to distribute like favors at a charity gala. My mother reached for her pearls, fingers trembling with a mix of shock and envy. A surprise would be gracious. Gavin didn't speak. His silence said enough. A muscle in his cheek twitched, the kind that comes when pride cracks and something unpleasant slips through. My father finally nodded, deciding this plan suited his image of generosity. Family should stay connected. It will mean something. The words tasted righteous, coated with self-importance. Chairs scraped. Napkins were dropped on plates. They moved with hurried purpose, as though stillness might let doubt settle. Elise snatched a bottle of wine from the table, clutching it like a trophy. They didn't pack gifts or call ahead. They didn't consider whether a rival would be welcome. They didn't think. They reacted, the way people do when the world suddenly stops orbiting around them. Coats went on. Doors opened. Chilled air brushed their faces. Without hesitation, they marched to the car, pride tucked into their pockets like sharp objects, ready to present their goodwill and bask in the reflection of something they never helped build. They drove off into the cold evening, headlights slicing through the dark, unaware they were heading toward a place where pretense had no power. Laughter floated through the dining room, light and genuine, filling the high ceilings like music. Plates were half empty, glasses warm in hands, voices weaving together in soft comfort. A joke from Tom set off a ripple of chuckle, and Nora wiped a tear from the corner of her eye, not from sadness but from laughing too hard. The fire hummed, and for a moment, everything felt steady and right. Then headlights swept across the windows, bright beams cutting through the warm glow like a blade. Conversation faltered mid-sentence. Forks hovered in the air. I felt it before anyone spoke. That shift, that quiet alertness that comes when the past knocks on your front door uninvited. A car door slammed outside. Footsteps crunched along the gravel. The handle turned without hesitation. The entrance door swung open, and there they were. Elise stepped in first, chin lifted like she owned the air she breathed. Gavin behind her, stiff and unsure, eyes darting around as if searching for an escape already. My parents followed, wrapped in polite superiority, taking in the room with wide, assessing stares. Silence hit like cold water. Every guest froze, hands paused mid-motion, faces shifting from warmth to guarded caution. Elise forced a bright grin, voice too sweet to be honest. "Surprise," she sang, as though this were some sitcom reunion instead of an intrusion. "We just had to see you." She looked around the room as if she expected applause for arriving. Gavin gave a small nod, trying to appear casual, but his shoulders sat too high, tension betraying him. My mother's eyes skimmed the table, the room, the guests, curiosity mixed with judgment soft enough to pass as politeness. My father's jaw clenched once before stretching into a practiced smile. I stood slowly, taking my time, not rushing to fill the quiet. Calm moved through me like steady water. No anger, no surprise, just clarity. "You weren't invited," I said, voice even, smooth as polished wood. A quiet ripple moved through my guests, not fear but anticipation. Then I let a small, controlled smile rise. "But there's always room at the table." Elise's smile flickered for a heartbeat. She hadn't expected grace. She'd come ready for pity or embarrassment, maybe even tears. Instead, she found stillness she couldn't shake. Chairs were pulled out. My family sat among the people they never bothered to remember. No one spoke at first. The only sounds were the soft clink of silverware settling, the fire cracking gently behind us, and the quiet breathing of people who suddenly felt they were sitting inside a storm about to break. The space between us thickened, hanging heavy like smoke that refused to clear. Smiles strained. Movement stiffened. Forks touched plates with hesitant taps. No shouting, no chaos. Just the unmistakable tension of two worlds colliding, one built on posturing and the other on truth, occupying the same table for the first time. The first few minutes passed in uneasy clinks of silverware and forced breathing. Candlelight softened the room, but nothing softened the tension. Voices rose again in slow waves. Small comments here and there, polite phrases stretched thin over something. My family tried to pretend they belonged, but the table itself seemed to reject the act. Nora broke the silence first. She didn't look at my father as she spoke. She didn't need to. Her tone was calm, steady, like someone used to telling hard truths without flinching. I remember working in the cardiology wing downtown, she said, slicing into her green. Long shift. Patient family upset. One man yelled so loud security came. She paused, dabbing the corner of her mouth delicately. I lost my position after that day. Forks paused halfway to lips. My father stiffened but kept his gaze down, pretending to reach for his water. A flush crept up his neck. Next came Tom, voice gentle, eyes soft with memory rather than anger. Some folks forget kindness when they think someone's below them, he murmured. Funny thing, you never know who you'll cross paths with again. His statement drifted in the air like a quiet warning. My mother let out a tight laugh, brittle, artificial, nerves leaking through the cracks. She scanned the table, realization dawning in pieces. This wasn't coincidence. These weren't casual guests. Cal sat across from Gavin, posture relaxed, fork tapping lightly against ceramic. He spoke casually, as if commenting on the weather. Trust is a strange thing, he said, lifting his glass. You build a business with a friend, share ideas, plan futures, and one signature later, it all belongs to him. His eyes didn't leave Gavin. Calm words, sharp truth. Takes years to climb out of that hole. The sound of Gavin's grip tightening around his wine glass filled the hush, faint but unmistakable. The stem trembled between his fingers. Elise's wide smile held for a breath too long, then wavered as though the muscles in her face could no longer pretend. Across the table, my mother's expression flickered from confusion to dawning recognition. She looked at each guest, her eyes tracing invisible lines. Stories she'd forgotten, faces she had once dismissed, consequences forming silhouettes in the soft light. My father cleared his throat, fumbling for composure. Elise tried to speak, but only air came out, a sound more like a gasp than confidence. Gavin stared at his plate, silent, jaw clenched hard enough to ache. It was quiet for a long moment, not awkward, truthful. Every breath felt like the air itself had grown heavy with honesty that could no longer be ignored. I lifted my glass slowly, letting the gesture draw every gaze. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Soft, steady, certain. To family, I said. Then I let the words settle before finishing. The kind you choose. Glasses lifted around me, gentle taps echoing like small victories. Some smiles returned, real ones, warm ones. Across the table, the four people who once defined my world sat small and silent in a room where love did not bow to blood. The moment after the toast hung still, fragile as glass. Then the crack came. Elise's chair scraped harshly against the floor as she shot upright, color blazing across her cheeks. So this is what you wanted? She burst out, voice trembling with fury rather than pain. You planned this. You gathered every bitter stray you could find just to take a shot at us. At me. Her glare seared across the table, daring me to argue. I didn't move. My hands rested lightly on the linen, steady and relaxed. Interesting, I answered softly. I opened my door. You forced yours into my evening. Her breath hitched, like she'd been slapped already. Don't twist this. You set a trap. A trap would require bait, I replied. You walked in on your own. Gavin shifted beside her, eyes fixed on his plate. My father sank deeper into himself. My mother pressed trembling fingers to her pearls, watching the conversation like she could stop it by holding her breath. And just like that, years unspoken clawed their way out. You know exactly what you did, I continued quietly. No shaking, no anger, just memory laid bare. You knew how much he meant to me. You smiled in my face while you flirted behind my back. You announced your new life in front of me like my feelings were trash. Elise's mouth twisted. You were always dramatic. No, I cut in, tone sharp enough to slice through her excuse. I was loyal, and you were not. She flinched. I didn't stop. You froze me out. You took what wasn't yours. You watched me walk away and never once reached out. Not a message, not a call. And when holidays came, You celebrated happily while pretending I no longer existed. You made it easy, she snapped. You were impossible to be around. Always moody. Always acting like the world owed you. A quiet voice interrupted. She didn't owe you anything. Gavin. He barely lifted his head. His words came slow, weighed with reluctant truth. She's right. Silence stamped out every flutter of conversation. Elise's eyes widened like the floor had dropped beneath her. Excuse me, she hissed. He didn't answer. Shame lived in the slump of his shoulders. Then her hand flew, fast, fierce. The slap cracked across his cheek like a gunshot. My mother's gasp knifed through the air. My father didn't breathe. I didn't move. Didn't blink. I'd waited years for accountability, but now that it sat in the room, I didn't need triumph. Only truth. Elise's eyes darted around the table, searching for someone to side with her. No one did. Every face stared back, not unkind but honest, seeing her for the first time without illusion. Her lip quivered. Rage and humiliation tangled, choking her. I straightened slightly, voice barely above a whisper, but somehow louder than her shouting had been. No one ruined anything for you, I said. You ruined it yourself. The words settled like dust after a storm, and for the first time, she seemed small, not powerful, not victorious, just human and hurting under the weight of her own choices. The door slammed, and their footsteps faded down the stone path, sharp and scattered like they couldn't agree even on how to leave. No more raised voices in my hall, no more glares thrown across the table. Just silence settling back where it belonged. For a moment, no one moved. Forks rested midair, spoons idle above untouched dessert. Then someone exhaled, long and shaky, and chairs eased forward again. Conversation didn't return right away. Instead, there were soft murmurs, gentle looks, quiet nods. No judgment, no questions, just understanding. A few guests offered small smiles, the kind that say we're here, we're still with you, and went back to their plates. The chocolate tart and roasted pear crumble suddenly looked sweeter, safer. One woman dabbed her eyes discreetly, not from sadness but from something like relief, like she'd watched justice happen without cruelty. Noah leaned in beside me, voice low so it didn't break the calm. In all my years cooking for holidays, he murmured, I don't think I've ever witnessed one this honest. I let out a slow breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Honest. That was the word. Not perfect, not triumphant honest. That was enough. Once the dishes were cleared and warm goodbyes drifted out into the night air, I stepped onto the balcony. The ocean below churned against the rocks, steady and free, moonlight catching every crest like silver. The house behind me glowed softly, full of warmth rather than noise. Far down the road, red taillights jerked and swerved. My family's car disappearing into darkness, voices still carrying faintly even from that distance, sharp and frantic. They didn't leave unified. They didn't leave righteous. They left exposed, arguing with the truth instead of me. I didn't feel thrill. I didn't feel victory. I just felt space open in my chest where old pain once lived. A quiet settling, a breath unclenched. For the first time in years, the weight that sat between my ribs loosened and slipped away like a stone falling into deep water. Not revenge, not triumph, release. I rested my hands on the cool railing, watching the waves break and rebuild themselves over and over. The night air smelled like cedar and salt and something new, possibility. Behind me, laughter floated faintly from the kitchen, warm and peaceful. For once, I wasn't on the outside of a family gathering. I was the one who created one. On my terms. With people who understood loss and kindness and second chances. I closed my eyes for a moment and simply stood there, letting the stillness wrap around me. I didn't need them. I never had to. And now they finally knew it too. Snow dusted the windowsills by the time the mail arrived. Winter had settled in, quiet and steady, wrapping the house in stillness. I opened the stack without thinking, bills, catalogs, a local flyer, then paused at the familiar handwriting on one envelope. My father's. 2 words on the return corner. Don Harrow. No softness rose inside me, just a steady calm as I slipped a letter opener under the seal. 1 sheet, thick paper, expensive like importance could be bought with stationery. No apology waited there. No acknowledgement. Just a single line in his neat, practiced handwriting. We didn't know you turned out this well. As if success were the only measure of worth. As if kindness, resilience, and building a life alone were invisible unless gilded with money and stone wall. I read it once, then again, and felt nothing sharp. No sting. Just a quiet understanding. They hadn't changed. And I no longer needed them to. I walked to the fireplace. The flames burned low, steady embers waiting. I held the letter over the crackling wood. Paper curled the moment heat kissed it, ink turning into a faint drift of smoke. It vanished without drama, without ceremony. Just gone. Weeks melted into another November. The house didn't feel vast or echoing anymore. It felt lived in. Warm throws on the sofas, dried flowers in vases, the faint scent of roasted herbs drifting from the kitchen. Laughter drifted through the hallways long before guests arrived, because Noah liked to talk to himself while cooking and I liked listening. The long table stood ready again, wood polished smooth, linen soft as a whisper. Plates set with care, not formality. Seats chosen because they belonged to people who mattered. The doorbell rang lightly and voices filled the entry, familiar ones now. The former neighbor with a shy smile. The nurse who always brought fresh bread. The man who once lost everything and now spoke like life might be generous again. Coats came off, hugs were shared. Someone set down a pie still warm from their oven. No tension, no performance. Just arrival. We gathered, settling into chairs, shoulders touching, sleeves brushing, easy and real. The hum of quiet chatter rose, gentle and warm enough to feel like a blanket. Someone clinked a glass accidentally, and everyone laughed. It sounded like belonging. Outside, the ocean rolled in slow waves. Candlelight flickered against the windows. The house held us like it had been waiting for this exact sound. I looked around the table, at faces full of life, gratitude, imperfect stories stitched back together, and my chest felt full in a way that had nothing to do with victory. Only peace. They never invited me to Thanksgiving. That's fine, because I stopped waiting for a seat and built the whole table myself. Hey besties, thanks for staying with me through this wild Thanksgiving journey. Being shut out by people who should have stood beside me hurt, but finding real connection with those who show up from the heart, worth every step. Sometimes walking away gives you the life you deserved all along. If this hit you, tap like, share, comment, and subscribe for more heartfelt stories. Can't wait to see you back here for the next one. Bye.